So before we get into this new creepy character, let's first take a dive into the setting and overall story of Zoonomaly. So the game has you playing as a new recruit for an organisation known as the Keepers of Bloom Order. Our main protagonist's mission is as follows. A zoo has been taken over by monsters from another dimension called Bloom Order. Our intel suggests that the cause of this monster infestation is locked away behind a massive facility door within the zoo. Someone has broken the key to this door into 20 shards and hid them all around the zoo. It's your job to recover all 20 shards, reassemble the key, and stop whatever is causing this monster infestation. Whoever hid the key shards did not make them easy to find. They have altered the zoo significantly by building large structures that puzzle the mind, making it harder to recover the shards. Although a tough mission is ahead of this new recruit, they've also been given a special device that will help them along the way. And this device is known as the Bloomerbang. The Bloomerbang we supplied you with will be an invaluable tool for your defense and exploration. Its powerful blasts of light can deter monsters and push physical objects away. The Bloom Spectrum screen will also allow you to see the invisible radiation given off by anything from Bloom Order. You will find it to be quite helpful on your mission. Good luck! So with the help of this device, our new recruit managed to solve all the puzzles throughout the zoo and collect all the key shards. But this wasn't an easy task. They had to survive against many monstrous creatures along the way. These include creepy variations of monkeys, cats, ostrich, fish, and even the zookeeper. The player had to enter each and every enclosure to collect the key shards, and in the end they collected all 20 and assembled the key. They then unlocked the large doors and completed their mission. You have completed your mission successfully. After successfully turning off the Bloom machine beneath the zoo, the monsters have been returned to Bloom Order. We will be sending a team to extract the machine for further study and to start work on restoring the zoo. Thank you for your service and congratulations on your success. We will be in touch. Ellis Entelman, Director of Operations, Keepers of Bloom Order. So the fact that there's a whole organisation called the Keepers of Bloom Order would mean that this incident wouldn't be the only one. And like it says at the end of the document, the organisation did indeed keep in contact with the new recruit. So it turns out that another zoo has been affected by the Bloom Order. Someone has set off another Bloom machine underneath the new zoo and spawned a whole number of new monstrous creatures. It's now up to the recruit to once again take on these creatures and shut down the Bloom machine. Armed with their trusty Bloomerbang, they set off on their next mission. When they arrive at the new zoo, things are a little different. The main doors that lead to the underground facility are now sealed shut by a digital lock. Spread all throughout the zoo are 30 hidden codes. The player needs to use the Bloomerbang scanner in order to locate these special codes. Each time the player scans a code, the digital lock would register a new number in its sequence. So once again, there's plenty of different animal enclosures that the player can pick from. Each one houses a number of deadly bloom animals that they'll need to deal with. But the first area that they pick is the reptile enclosure. And it's here that houses the first character they'll meet. And this character is the snake. Like the rest of the bloom animals, the snake is quite the odd looking creature. Instead of a long and slender body, the snake has 4 limbs, 2 legs, and 2 arms. But each extremity is a creepy looking snake's tail. The long neck and head appear to be poking out of a strange opening in the body. It's almost like it's using this body and it doesn't belong to them. The snake's mouth is filled with multiple sharp teeth and 2 large deadly fangs. The snake is highly venomous and should be avoided at all costs. One bite from its fangs would inject its lethal bloom venom into its victim and it would all be over. So when the player enters the reptile enclosure, there doesn't seem to be any sign of Bloom Order animals anywhere. So they push on and try to locate the hidden codes. In the reptile enclosure, there would be 2 codes. Both of these codes would be kept behind a puzzle. And the first puzzle has the player activating a number of switches. They need to figure out the right sequence in order to reveal the first code. Mainly this would be a guessing game with trial and error, but the player can scan with their Bloomerbang to see a hint to which lever is next in the sequence. Eventually they activate all the switches in the correct order, and once that happens, the code can now be scanned. The moment they do, the snake suddenly appears. The player needs to keep their distance and stop it from getting too close. When it comes to the snake, it can be held back by the bloomerbang. One shot will cause its neck and head to retreat back into its body. But this won't last for long, because seconds later, the snake's head would re-emerge and it would be in an angered state. Sometimes the best choice would be to run and hide. The snake would look around for the player, but eventually it would wander off elsewhere in the reptile enclosure. Now the player has to work on finding the second code in this area. After searching around, they find themselves at the next puzzle. This time they need to crawl through a maze and try and locate the code at the end. But as soon as they enter the maze, the snake would enter as well. It would slither out of its strange four-armed suit and reveal its long body. So now, whilst the player is navigating through this maze, the snake would also be slithering after them. They wouldn't have much time to stop and think about where to go, because the snake would be hot on their tail. If the player stops at all, it wouldn't be long before it bites them and eats them whole. Eventually, after frantically navigating through the maze, they locate the second code. They quickly scan it and another number gets added to the digital lock. The back of the cage maze opens up and the player can now exit. With the 2 codes scanned, that's all that's left for this area. So now the player leaves the snake behind and moves on to find the other codes. But they can only wonder what deadly blue water animals await them next. So I think that the snake would be an interesting first choice for the new creatures at the zoo. Not only is their design quite creepy, but I think the gameplay mechanic that they could add would be pretty interesting as well. I like the idea that the snake has a creepy, weird body that they can slither out of and have a different way of chasing the player. I think this could be pretty challenging and definitely keep the player on their toes. But as to what different animals will appear next, we'll just have to wait and see. And the next blue water creature that the player will encounter is the Rhino. This strange rhino creature stands on 2 feet and has a mouth full of sharp and deadly teeth. And just like a traditional rhino, it also has the 2 large horns on its head. In terms of size, the rhino can vary, but on average they can weigh up to 800 kilograms or 1700 pounds. The creature stands at about 8 to 9 feet tall. When it comes to aggression, the rhino can be quite territorial and protective, especially if they feel threatened. If they catch sight of the player, they'll charge towards them straight away. So it's important to approach them with extreme caution. Their size and powerful charges can cause serious harm and eliminate the player instantly. So unfortunately for the player, the next set of secret codes would be located in the rhino pen. This area would be made up of different segments. There would be multiple fences that divide up this area and separate the player from the rhino. But it wouldn't take very long at all for the player to meet this hulking creature. As they turn the next corner, they come face to face with the rhino. The rhino stands there and stares at the player, and without a moment's notice, they charge straight towards them. Armed with their bloomerbang, the player quickly fires off a round, but it has zero effect on the rhino. The player quickly dodges the attack as the rhino rushes by. That was a close one. If they dodged the attack any later, it would have been all over. Knowing that their weapon has zero effect on the rhino, they quickly exit the pen and try to come up with another plan. There's no way they were going to get past this rhino with their standard bloomerbang. If the recruit was going to get past them and scan the secret code, they were going to need a stronger weapon. So after contacting the keepers of Blumorder, they arranged for a special package to be airdropped in. But they couldn't risk this package being dropped directly inside the zoo, in case it falls into one of the animal enclosures. So instead, they dropped the package on the outskirts of the zoo in the forest. The player promptly makes their way towards the forest and starts searching for the special package. Using their bloomerbang, they scan the area and try to locate its signal. Finally, after searching through the forest, they find the package. They open it up and retrieve the new weapon. And this weapon is known as the Bloom Lance. The Bloom Lance is a larger and much more powerful version of the bloomerbang. The Bloom Lance fires high-strength anti-bloom energy beams directly at its target. Whereas the bloomerbang requires light globes as ammo to reload, the Bloom Lance uses different light globes for its ammo. To achieve this high anti-bloom beam, it requires fluorescent light tubes as the ammo. This type of light globe would be loaded right into the middle of the weapon from the top. almost like loading an arrow into a crossbow. So now, armed with this new bloom lance, they are sure to pack more of a punch and take down the Rhino. So once again they enter the Rhino pen and search for the secret code. As soon as they see the Rhino, the player readies the bloom lance and prepares to fire. The Rhino charges towards them at full speed, and just at the last second, the player fires off one of the energy beams. The surge of energy hits the Rhino at full force. The anti-bloom energy locks them into a frozen state as it pulses around them. For now, the Rhino is frozen in place, and this would give the player enough time to find the code. But they would need to be careful, because before they know it, the Rhino would be free once again and charge towards them. The time they would be frozen for would never be guaranteed, and the player would continuously have to check behind them to see if the Rhino was there. And if it was, they would need to fire another beam with the bloom lance. So after keeping the Rhino at bay and searching around the area, they finally locate the secret code. They quickly scan it and another number gets added to the digital lock. Now all they need to do is get out of this area before the Rhino can move again. The player has now successfully located another code and now has to locate the others. But this task is easier said than done. They still need to carry out their mission and successfully deactivate the bloom machine. But as to what strange and dangerous bloom animals they'll face next is uncertain, but surely they'll find out what it is sooner or later. So I think that the Rhino would be a pretty interesting character to see. The sheer size and power of this creature would be intimidating to the player and keep them on their toes. I think the introduction of a new weapon like the bloom lance would also be pretty interesting to see. It would change up the gameplay and also be a means of taking on the larger creatures at the zoo. The fluorescent light globe ammo would be pretty hard to come by, but when the player finds them and loads them in the weapon, they are sure to pack a punch and keep these demonic creatures at bay. But also as to what the next animal will be, we'll just have to wait and see. And the creature that inhabits this enclosure isn't too happy about the player's intrusion. And this bloom creature is known as the Crocodile. The Crocodile is quite a strange bloom animal, that's for sure. It's a fearsome creature that can move quickly on land and in water. With its 4 arms, it can grab onto prey with ease. The sharp teeth make it a formidable predator capable of tearing through anything. It's best to keep a safe distance from the crocodile to avoid any unwanted encounters. It stands at about 7 to 8 feet tall and weighs around 500 kilograms or 1100 pounds. Besides its 2 feet, 4 arms and sharp teeth, it also has super tough, scaly skin that can protect it from all sorts of attacks. Despite the crocodile's large body, it can also be extremely stealthy. When in the water, it's known to be completely silent. Its prey wouldn't have any idea that it was right behind them unless it was on the lookout. So the player has to be extra careful, and make sure not to end up as the crocodile's next prey. So the majority of this enclosure is filled with waist-deep murky water. The surface is covered with lily pads and they can't see what's lurking underneath. As they wade through this murky water, they need to be on the lookout for the crocodile and also the secret codes. There's some areas that are out of the water and the player decides to check them out first. Eventually they come across their first puzzle that's hiding the secret code. They need to use their bloomerbang to scan multiple wall faces. Sometimes a code would show up, but it wouldn't be the real one. The player would know this when the code fades away. They'll know when they've found the real code when it stays there and doesn't fade away. Eventually, after scanning multiple faces of the wall, they find the real code. They quickly scan it and move on to the next secret code in this area. Unfortunately, to get the next code, it'll require the player to jump back into the murky water. This time, the secret code is hidden underneath the floating plastic lily pads. But the player wouldn't have to check underneath every single lily pad. They would only have to check the ones that glow green when they use the scanner. While searching for the right lily pad, the player sees something on the dry area of the enclosure. As they get a better look, they see it's the crocodile. What on earth is that thing? It slightly resembled a crocodile, but it was heavily corrupted by the bloom. The creature moves towards the water and crawls in. In a matter of seconds, the large beast disappears underneath the water's surface. The player has to move quickly or else it'll be torn apart by this ravenous crocodile. While searching for lily pads, the player needs to keep an eye out for the crocodile. There would be hardly any sound that would indicate that it was behind them. They would need to look out for the crocodile's eyes that were just above the water's surface. But before they knew it, the crocodile launches itself out of the water. Just before it attacks, the player fires off a round from the bloom lance. The anti-bloom beam hits the crocodile directly, but the water absorbs the energy and shocks the player as well. If they get shocked again by the energy, they wouldn't last very long, so using the bloom lance whilst in the water wasn't an option. The crocodile swims under the water once again and stalks the player. So now the player has to solely rely on dodging the crocodile's attacks. So after searching through the water for the secret lily pad and dodging oncoming attacks, they finally locate it. They flip it over and scan the code. Now that they have what they need, the player quickly exits the water. But little did they know, the crocodile had the same idea. The creature meets the player on dry land and charges after them. The player quickly tries to fire off a round from the bloom lance, but they were all out of ammo. Their only option now is to run to safety. So as quickly as they can, the player runs towards the guardrail fence. Once they hop over the fence, they would be safe. But the crocodile was also quite the quick enemy as well, and escaping its clutches would prove difficult. But eventually the player outmaneuvers the crocodile and escapes from the enclosure. Any sooner and they would have been snapped up in its powerful jaws. But now that they're in the safe zone, they can finally be at ease. But now's not the time to rest. The player has lots more codes they need to find around the zoo, and the further they explore this zoo, the more difficult this task will be. So I think the crocodile would be a pretty awesome character to see. Based on their sheer size and appearance, I think it would be quite the intimidating enemy, that's for sure. With their multiple arms and sharp teeth, they would definitely prove to be a challenge, especially since the player isn't able to use the bloom lance whilst in the water. They would need to solely rely on trying to outsmart this formidable creature. And as to what other dangerous creatures lay ahead, we'll just have to wait and see. But unfortunately for the player, there are still many codes that need to be scanned throughout the zoo. But there were some codes that weren't located inside the park as well. Some of these codes were scattered out in the dark forest that surrounds the zoo, and within this forest, an array of dangerous animals are lurking around. It seems like it wasn't just the animals in the zoo that were affected by the Bloom Order. The Bloom Machine's range reached out well into the forest. This being the case, some of the forest-dwelling animals got corrupted and morphed into creepy bloom creatures. And now they wait in the dark forest for any poor souls to enter their domain. And once they do, it will be all over. So now, let's introduce these creepy forest-dwelling creatures. And the next bloom animal we have is the wolves. These strange-looking animals usually hunt in packs. At any given time, there will be a minimum of 3 wolves lurking around. The wolves are quite deadly creatures. On average, an adult wolf will weigh about 20 to 60 kilos or 45 to 130 pounds. On all fours, the wolves measure to about 5 to 6 feet long, and standing upright about 6 to 7 feet tall. As for aggression, the wolves are highly territorial. They display aggressive behaviour when protecting their pack or hunting. They are known to be quite intelligent and have excellent hunting skills. The wolves are also quite fast. They can run up to speeds of about 35 miles per hour. But what is most interesting of all is their disturbing appearance. The wolves have mouths filled with razor-sharp teeth and black dripping saliva. Their bodies are covered in a matted grey fur with strange bare limbs sticking out. With these strange hairless limbs, it almost looks like another creature is wearing the wolf's skin. Anyone who enters the forest needs to be extremely careful. They would need to be aware of their surroundings and always watch their back. Soon enough, they will notice a number of glowing eyes in between the dark trees. And before they can even run away, the wolves would all strike at once. So, due to these deadly creatures, many of the investigators or intruders to the park stay well away from the forest. But the new recruit didn't have a choice. Some of the secret codes they needed to scan were inside the dark forest. So they set out and try to find them as quick as they can. Hopefully they can avoid these deadly wolves, but something tells them that wasn't going to be the case. So now they step foot inside the dark forest. This place is eerily quiet. The new recruit can feel multiple eyes staring at them from the darkness of the trees, but regardless they need to move ahead and locate the secret codes. For their first task to find one of the codes, they need to follow a large pipe on the ground that leads through the forest. If they follow it for long enough, it'll eventually lead them to the first code. Whilst they make their way forward, the player hears something truly terrible. That was the last thing they wanted to hear right now. As they look to the left, they see the glowing eyes from behind the trees. They look to the right, and sure enough, there's more eyes staring at them as well. The player gets their bloomerbang ready to fire at whatever comes next. They couldn't use their bloom lance. It would be far too slow of a weapon to keep up with these fast creatures. All of a sudden, the first wolf leaps out towards them. The player fires off a round and sends them back into the forest. That was a close one. Now they only have 4 light bulbs left. For now, that bright blast from the bloomerbang is keeping the wolves at bay. But they need to be careful not to run out of ammo, because out in the deep dark forest, there's definitely no light bulbs. As they continue to follow the pipe, they finally reach the first code. It was stuck to a signpost. Right before they scan it, another wolf leaps out and attacks. They quickly blast it away and then scan the code. Now they've only got 3 bulbs left, but there's only one more code to find in this area. When they scan the area, they notice something quite strange. The glowing beacon is moving. But how can that be? That's never happened before. As they get closer to investigate, they see what it is. It was a small glowing rabbit, but compared to all the other animals, it looked perfectly normal. As they scan it to get a better reading, it becomes clear that the rabbit is the next code. Just before they can get a full scan on the rabbit, another wolf leaps out at the player. With another bright flash, the wolf is sent back into the forest. But now, the rabbit is gone. So, in this last gameplay segment, the player needs to chase down the rabbit in order to scan it. But in doing so, they'll also need to fend off the wolves as well. So, after a while of chasing the rabbit and blasting away the wolves, they finally corner the rabbit. They get a final scan on it and it transforms into the secret code. Finally, they have what they need and now they can leave this deadly forest. So the player makes a run for it, narrowly dodging attacks from the wolves here and there. But finally, they make it out and re-enter the park. Now they just need to continue on their task of finding all the codes. But the further they explore this zoo, the more dangerous creatures they'll meet. And as to who they'll meet next isn't clear, and until then, we'll just have to wait and see. So I think that the wolves would be a great addition to our Zoonomaly cast of characters. I think that multiple enemies would offer up quite the challenge for our player. The stress of dealing with the multiple wolves would definitely keep them on their toes. They would need to be careful of where they are in the forest and also keep an eye on their ammo as well. And if they aren't careful, the wolves' glowing eyes would be the last thing they see. Yet another zoo's animals have morphed into evil and dangerous creatures. And it's been up to the recruit to once again investigate the affected park and return it back to its original state. It seems that someone has activated another bloom machine and it needs to be shut off immediately. This time around, instead of collecting key shards to open the door, the player has been scanning special codes. When they scan enough codes, the electronic lock to the underground facility will finally open up. But this hasn't been an easy task. Each of these codes is guarded by a terrible bloom animal. The animals we've met so far have been the snake, the rhino, the crocodile, and the wolves. Each enemy has proven to be quite the challenging foe, and each time the player has had to figure out how to beat them and scan these special codes. But now, this time they face one of the most difficult challenges at the zoo. This new enemy will have them out of their element and trying to figure out their next move. And if they can't figure it out quick enough, then it'll all be over. So the next area that the player approaches is the aquarium. This large area is filled with water, as one would assume. But this large mass of water that's trapped behind solid glass houses a terrible creature. It lurks within the depths waiting for its next prey, and soon enough that prey would waltz right into its domain. And eventually this creature would find its next meal. So the next bloom creature we'll be looking at is known as the shark. This shark is a truly terrifying predator. With rows of sharp, deadly teeth and natural swimming abilities, it'll truly make for a difficult enemy. The shark weighs about 600 kilos or about 1,300 pounds, and this creature measures up to about 14 feet long. A strange feature about this shark is its multiple limbs. This creature seems to have sprouted, unique-looking arms and legs. Whether or not this creature can use these limbs out of the water is unknown, but it's been recorded using these limbs to swim through the water much faster and grab onto their prey. And once it has a hold of its prey, there was no letting go. But the most strange detail of all was the large fishing hook that was embedded in its body. It seems like someone has tried to catch this creature before, but in the end, the shark proved far too strong. It must have dragged the fishermen into the tank and taken care of them. But now, with the large hook stuck in its body, it has become much more aggressive and agitated. Just the sight of another person would surely send the shark into a ferocious frenzy, and this being the case, the player needs to stay on their guard. So once the players enter the aquarium, they are immediately surrounded by the deep blue water. On all sides, the mysterious water stares at them from behind the glass. The player doesn't want to know what lurks in this deep water. They need to hurry up and quickly find the codes in this area. So that's exactly what they do. Their first task has them navigating through the underground tunnels in search of the first code. This maze of tunnels proves to be quite confusing. The player needs to keep track of where they're going or else they'll be all turned around. Whilst making their way through these tunnels, they can feel a strong presence staring at them from behind the water. This shouldn't be a problem since whatever it is should be behind the glass. But something tells them that they'll need to get closer to this mystery creature before they know it. Eventually, after navigating through the tunnels, the player finds the first code. They quickly scan it and continue on to the next one. It seems that the next code is upstairs on the next level. Just their luck, this next code would be right above the tank itself. As they walk back out into the open area, that's when they see it. The shark is staring at them from behind the glass. It's just floating there in the water with its eyes locked onto the player. Wherever the player moves, its eyes would follow. It seems like this creature wasn't going to let them out of its sights. The player needs to be careful around this creepy shark. If they slip up at any time, they'll surely be its next prey. So the player makes their way up to the surface level of the tank. It seems they need to traverse a number of moving platforms in order to scan the next code. But they'll need to be careful where they step. If they miss any of the platforms, then the shark will be waiting immediately to snap them up in its jaws. So the player leaps from platform to platform. They're being very careful to avoid the shark whenever it tries to grab them from underneath the water. They would need to be patient and wait for the right time to make their jump. Eventually, after jumping from platform to platform, they reach the final code. They quickly scan it and then try to make their way out of here. But as they make it to their next platform, the shark knocks them into the water. The player falls in and now they are in grave danger. Now it's only the shark and the player inside this tank. They need to swim out of here before they are eaten whole. They can't use their weapons underneath the water or else they'll take damage as well. So whenever they see the shark, they would need to swim out of its attack path. If they narrowly dodge its attacks, they should be fine. They're almost out of the tank. They just need to swim a little further. Up ahead is a grapple system that can grab onto them and hoist them out of the tank. Just a little closer and they would be out of this dangerous water. Eventually they grab onto it and hoist themselves out of the tank. But just at the last second, the shark leaps out of the tank as well. This terrible creature is now on dry land, but before it can attack the player, they quickly activate the grapple. It lowers down and grabs onto the hook protruding out of the shark's body. It hoists up the shark and leaves it dangling in mid-air. Now the shark is neither in water or on dry land. Whilst in this state, it can't attack anyone. So now the player is free to go and move on to the next code. but they'll need to be careful as there's many more creatures that stand in their way. And as they say, there's always a bigger fish out there. As they continue their journey, they have no idea what's ahead of them, but the mission is as it always was. Turn off the blue machine and send these creatures back to where they came from. But if they'll be able to complete this mission is another story, and until then, we'll just have to wait and see. So I think that the shark would be another great addition to our Zoonomaly cast of characters. I think they offer an interesting challenge for the player and also would leave them out of their element. Being in the deep dark water of the tank would surely put them in a panic, but it would be up to the player to use their wits and keep calm, because it would be up to them if they sink or swim.